Number 9. Jennifer Denu. A 34-year-old former New York State trooper named Jennifer Denu found herself in embarrassingly hot water last year when she became entangled in a catfishing scandal that made news headlines and ended her career. Things looked promising for the woman when she graduated from her law enforcement training in 2016 and drove right into her new line of work. But she veered down a wayward path in 2018 when she posed as a man online and began an online relationship with a 33-year-old woman living on Long Island. They corresponded for 3 months, during which time the victim sent nude photos of herself to Denu. The ex-cop threatened to post the nudes online if the woman didn't travel to New York City to buy a fake ID for her. An investigation led to Denu's arrest for this and other similar incidents. She was also charged in Rome, New York for using various false identities to harass another woman for more than 15 years after they graduated from the same high school. The case out of Rome was ultimately dismissed and sealed, but the charges stemming out of Long Island stuck. Denu resigned from her job earlier this year, and she was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Number 8. Susanna Burch. By the time she was 27, Susanna Burch had spent 12 years in a relationship with someone she never met in person. She met the man she knew as Richard in a chat room when she was just 15 years old. He claimed that he was 17 and that he lived in another part of the state, roughly 8 hours away from Susanna. The two hit it off pretty quickly based on their shared interests and spent hours at a time talking. But there were things about Richard that didn't add up. His promises to meet up with his online girlfriend never came to fruition, and he never video chatted with Susanna. He told her that his parents were overprotective, and for a number of years, it was a believable excuse. The couple continued their long-distance romance and even got engaged after Susanna turned 18. 9 more years of breaking up, getting back together, and frequent arguments went by before the young woman saw the TV show Catfish and decided that she deserved some long-awaited answers about the man she's been involved with for nearly half her life. Truth be told, Susanna had suspected for years that Richard wasn't being completely honest with her, and she was finally ready to face the issue head-on. She sought the help of a service that specialized in identifying catfishes and detailed the experience in an article she wrote for SBS News. The hired investigators quickly connected Richard's information to a Facebook account belonging to a married 60-year-old named Patrick. The next time he called, Susanna confronted him. At first, Patrick denied the catfishing, but he apparently realized that he was in a hole too deep to dig himself out of with more excuses, and simply told Susanna, in his own words, that it just grew and grew out of control. He then unloaded about his drinking and marital problems, which had the effect of turning the tables and making Susanna feel guilty. Realizing she was being manipulated once again, she said goodbye to Patrick one final time, hung up the phone, and moved on with her life. Number 7. Keegan Anthony Klein. In a pair of tragedies that became known as the Delphi murders, the lifeless bodies of teenagers Abigail Williams and Liberty German were found in Delphi, Indiana in 2017. The girls' remains were discovered along the same hiking trail they had vanished from the day before. Police have not released details of how the teens were killed, and there have been no arrests in the baffling case. For quite some time, detectives failed to identify a suspect or even a person of interest. Their investigation eventually led them to a 27-year-old man from Peru, Indiana, named Keegan Anthony Klein. He had created a fake Instagram profile under the username Anthony Shots, using photos of a fit young male model. The social media user was the last person to have any contact with the girls before they were murdered. By the time police began to suspect Klein in the case, he was already awaiting trial for 30 other alleged crimes relating to child pornography and soliciting minors for sex. He admitted to using the Anthony Shots profile to solicit sexually explicit photos of young girls, but he adamantly denied being the Delphi killer. Unfortunately for now, the murderer remains at large, but the findings seem promising and offer new hope to a case that has otherwise hit a discouraging standstill. Number 6. Mariah Johnson. Mariah Johnson grew up going back and forth between Washington State and Colorado. After high school, she joined the U.S. Air Force and got an astrophysics degree. She spent several years at an Air Force base in Colorado before ending up in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where she's currently stationed. Things took an unexpected turn for Johnson when her Instagram account was hacked during her late teens. Catfishers began using her photos and identity to scam unsuspecting love interests out of thousands of dollars over the internet. She believes that her uniform made her especially susceptible to the widespread fraud because people tend to hold military members in high regard. Myra told the Las Cruces Sun News that the impersonation has put her in the craziest situations. She said that people have messaged her accusing her of stealing their money. Based on what the victims have told Johnson, the scammers pretending to be her say that she's currently deployed and needs money. Myra noticed that social media users over a certain age seem more vulnerable to these scams because they don't realize that every account they come across is real. She's been dealing with this for years now, and while the use of her photos was admittedly slightly flattering at first, it caused more problems for the soldier than anything. For example, when she arrived at her current base, her supervisor told her that he couldn't figure out which of the 20 Facebook accounts that appeared in a search using her name and photos belonged to her. Things got even more suspicious when a scammer pretending to be Johnson included a link to an adult website in the fake profile. But to Myra's surprise, authorities were unable to do anything about it. They told her that she has no options for legal recourse, and that her best bet was to make people aware that people were impersonating her online. She tried filing complaints on social media websites, but her concerns eventually fell on deaf ears, and nothing was done about the fake profiles. So for now, she continues to deal with it. As a rising influencer with more than 13,000 followers, it's probably safe to assume that it's becoming easier to get the word out. Number 5. Renee Martin. Teresa and Mark Martin's lives were forever changed by tragedy in 2013 when they received a text message from their 20-year-old daughter, Renee, saying that she loved her parents and apologizing for what she was about to do. Just hours later, the young woman, who worked in Sydney, Australia as a hairdresser, took her own life. Less than 2 years earlier, she had started communicating online with a man named Braden, whom she was introduced to by her best friend. The two exchanged tens of thousands of text messages, and Renee grew to believe that Braden was her future husband. Just months after they began talking, Braden said that he was going to jail on a manslaughter charge after getting into an accident that killed one of his friends. Renee vowed to stand by her man, and they even looked into whether they could travel internationally for their honeymoon with Braden's criminal record. But he abruptly ended the relationship one day in 2013, leaving Renee so heartbroken that she committed suicide. It soon came to light that she was never communicating with the real person in the first place, but that her best friend, Camila, the one who introduced the pair, had catfished her for 18 months straight. Before the truth was exposed, Camila had attended the memorials in Renee's honor and stood alongside the deceased young woman's grieving family, playing up the role of a mourning best friend. Renee's family later recalled that Camila was bizarrely obsessed with Renee and seemed to have developed a romantic interest in her at some point. They believe that Camila created the fake Braden identity when she realized that Renee did not feel the same way. While Camila's actions were reprehensible, they technically weren't against the law, and she never faced criminal charges. The tragedy has prompted campaigns for catfishing to be made illegal in Australia, so that in the future, perpetrators of this potentially deadly deception can be brought to justice. Number 4. Tori Marshall. Writing for the Australian website Mamma Mia, Tori Marshall explained that she first created a Tinder account when she was 23 because the dating pool in her small town was, in her words, non-existent. She met a man named Stelios through the app in 2019 and immediately found him attractive. More importantly, she felt a strong emotional connection with him, unlike anything she'd ever experienced before. After chatting on Tinder for a while, the pair decided to move the conversation to more private platforms. Something didn't seem right when Stelios added Tori on Facebook Messenger, but she was unable to friend request him. She brought it up, and he said that he's been banned from using Facebook despite remaining active on Messenger. At the time, the excuse seemed plausible. It was only in hindsight that Tori would realize it was the first of many red flags that would follow. She nevertheless trusted Stelios fully and told him everything about her life, even after he started doing some things that made her uncomfortable, including asking her for intimate photos. His manipulation and charm were convincing enough to cause Tori to overlook these behaviors. Finally, they made plans to actually meet in person. Tori took time off work so that Stelios could spend a week at her house. When the day came, though, he messaged her and said that he was in town, but he wasn't going to meet up with her until she did what he asked. He was trying to get the young woman to send an explicit video for himself. Eager to finally meet, Tori reluctantly obliged. But as soon as she sent the video, Stelios dropped off the radar. He never showed up or spoke to her ever again. leaving her to wonder who she had sent such personal and private content to. In her own words, Tori was left feeling disgusting, manipulated, and confused. Police looked into the matter and told her that Stelios wasn't a real person, but that the only way they could take legal action was if he shared her explicit video online. Thankfully, that hasn't happened, and hopefully, it never will. Number 3. Andrew Wolf and Cray Strange. Andrew Wolf was an award-winning math teacher who was well-liked amongst his students at the private Springdale Chestnut Hill Academy in Philadelphia. But there may have been ulterior motives behind his friendliness, as locals learned last year when he was arrested for a catfishing scheme that involved enticing middle and high school-aged kids to send explicit photos and videos. Wolf is accused of co-conspiring with a 19-year-old man from Carthage, New York, named Cray Strange, to carry out the sinister plot. Throughout 2020 and 2021, the pair allegedly persuaded young boys to produce lewd content by posing as teenage girls. According to federal prosecutors, Wolf gave one 13-year-old a $100 PlayStation gift card in exchange for explicit footage of himself. The school's head, Stephen Drugan, described the news as difficult and disturbing, and reassured parents that the school had fully cooperated with law enforcement throughout the investigation. But he spoke too soon when he said that none of the hundreds of explicit images and videos found on Wolf's device were of children who attended the academy. As it turned out, some of the school students were, in fact, victimized as part of the sickening scheme. Wolf and Strange faced a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 5 years if found guilty. Number 2. Taunting Teenagers. A group of unnamed teenagers from Melbourne, Australia recently made headlines for allegedly using fake online dating accounts to lure and attack unsuspecting gay men who were looking for companionship. The repeated violence sparked a police investigation that led them to the youths, who were accused of persuading their victims to meet at a park. 2 of the targeted men suffered minor injuries, and a third was left physically uninjured but endured homophobic verbal abuse. Police arrested 5 boys, ages ranging 15 to 16, and a 19-year-old man in connection with the assaults. The suspects are all due back in court at a later date. A law enforcement spokesman made it clear that the department will not tolerate hate-motivated crimes and promised to continue acting swiftly in response to complaints about these types of things happening. And number 1, Ezra Mayu. 17-year-old Ezra Mayu hasn't been seen or heard from since October 15th of last year, when he was dropped off at his job in Silverton, Oregon. When his parents arrived to pick him up at the end of his shift, he was nowhere to be found. Authorities theorized that the teen had run away and tracked his movement from Silverton to Salem, then to Seattle, where Ezra's tale went cold. Investigators and family members suspect that he fell victim to a catfishing scam that may have landed him in serious danger, but they have no way of knowing for sure. For now, the young man's disappearance remains a mystery. Detectives hope that anyone who may have information about his whereabouts come forward to assist in the ongoing investigation, which has left the Mayu family feeling distraught and heartbroken. Number 9. Henry T. Nicholas III. An exorbitantly wealthy businessman named Henry T. Nicholas III had numerous brushes with the law over the years. But his most shocking arrest came in 2018 when a smorgasbord of illicit substances was allegedly seized from his Las Vegas hotel room. Police accused the eccentric billionaire of trafficking drugs after they reportedly found marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and ecstasy in his possession. They also said that they found used-up canisters of nitrous oxide, more commonly known as laughing gas, and that the man's 37-year-old friend, Ashley Fargo, was unconscious at the bizarre scene, with a partially deflated balloon in her mouth. The following year, Nicholas entered an Alford plea to 2 felony drug possession charges. An Alford plea is a guilty plea in which the accused does not admit guilt to the crime, but acknowledges that there were likely enough evidence to result in a guilty plea. The prosecution dropped several more serious charges and agreed not to pursue a jail sentence if Nicholas and Fargo attended drug counseling, performed 250 hours of community service, and donated $1 million to a drug treatment and rehabilitation program. Apparently, if you're rich enough to donate that much money, you don't get in that much trouble. Number 8. Farouk Abdul. In 2008, the lifeless body of a 23-year-old Norwegian woman named Martine Vick Magnuson, was found beneath some rubble in the basement of a London apartment complex. Someone had strangled her to death and dumped her body there after she was last seen alive at a nightclub over a mile away. Investigators appealed to the public for help identifying the man that Martine was last seen with before her death. Their search led them to billionaire Farouk Abdul, a fellow student that the young woman attended university with and one of Yemen's wealthiest men. By then, Abdul had fled the UK for Cairo. From there, it's believed that he traveled to the Yemenite capital of Sana'a, where he reportedly retained a lawyer. Around the same time, London's Metropolitan Police named Abdul as the prime suspect in the case. A little over a month after Martine's murder, a man in his 50s was arrested on suspicion of assisting the killer. In an apparent breakthrough earlier this year, a woman in her 60s was arrested for the same reason. While the development marks a major milestone in the fight to bring the murderer to justice, police admittedly still have a lot more work to do. Martine's heartbroken loved ones continue to campaign tirelessly for the slain woman's suspected killer to be held accountable for the allegations against him. Meanwhile, detectives continue to investigate the case and have publicly reminded Abdullah that they won't stop until justice is served. They put the pressure on him to return to the UK and face the music once and for all, but so far, it hasn't happened. Number 7. Justin Murdoch. Justin Murdoch is the heir to the multi-billion-dollar Dole food fortune, but the 49-year-old made headlines for vastly different reasons earlier this year, a few months after he allegedly struck his 24-year-old girlfriend, model Talia Skye, in the face. The pair had only been dating for a little over 2 months when the young woman somehow got a black eye. Things supposedly got heated when Skye wanted to leave a Halloween party that she and Murdoch had attended together at the Scarface Mansion in Beverly Hills. An argument ensued, and the upset woman reportedly texted one of her girlfriends. She asked her to come pick her up while the couple were on their way to Murdoch's home in the upscale Bel Air suburb of Los Angeles. Skye later accused her boyfriend of hitting her in the face before her friend arrived. The friend, who was identified only as Juliana, told the Daily Mail that when she got to the home, Talia was crying in the driveway and Murdoch was shirtless, hysterical, and flailing his arms. Juliana's descriptions of Skye's swollen and badly bruised face is reflected in a photo of the woman that the website obtained. Murdoch allegedly called his girlfriend crazy and accused her of hurting herself, claiming that he doesn't hit women. He was soon arrested by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, but it's unclear whether he will ever get charged in the incident. Number 6. Robert Durst. Collectively worth around $8.1 billion, the Durst family owns vast amounts of real estate in New York City and Philadelphia. Their fortune goes back generations to the company's founding in 1915. In 2006, heir Robert Durst sold his $65 million stake in the business to his relatives. He was originally expected to take over the business, but his younger brother, Douglas, was chosen for the job instead. Family members would rather later testify that Robert's behavior became eccentric before he left the company. Douglas said that he was afraid of Robert and believed his older brother wanted to kill him. But the real estate heir was strange even before then. In 1982, his first wife, Kathleen McCormick, disappeared. Robert had always been a suspect in the case, which remains unsolved to this day. Then, in 2000, his best friend, Susan Berman, was found dead in her Los Angeles home. She had been shot execution style. Berman had facilitated Robert's alibi in his wife's disappearance, and the LAPD had reportedly called her and said that they wanted to discuss the case right before she was killed. It's unknown whether Susan was actually contacted by law enforcement. Just months earlier, Durst had heard that the case regarding McCormick's disappearance had been reopened, and he had gone into hiding in Galveston, Texas. Things took an even stranger turn in 2001, when the man's elderly neighbor, Morris Black, was found dead and dismembered. Once again, Durst was considered a suspect. He served some time in jail on lesser charges relating to the death after a jury believed his claim that he killed Black in self-defense. The senior citizen was paroled in 2006. Robert was finally charged with Susan Berman's murder in 2015. By then, he had made news headlines for dressing as a woman and pretending to be mute as a way of avoiding questions about his wife's disappearance. Durst was finally sentenced to life in prison late last year. He died behind bars earlier this year at the age of 78. Number 5. Detained Yacht. Russia is not being seen in a very favorable light by most, amid Vladimir Putin's ongoing attempt to take over Ukraine. Consequently, economic sanctions have been imposed against the Russian government and several of the country's elite politicians and business people. The punishment prompted a mass exodus of superyachts owned by the ultra-wealthy, who scrambled to move their beloved boats from Europe to Maldives and other countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. Included amongst these super-rich yacht owners is Dmitrovich Pompyansky, the owner of Russia's largest steel pipe manufacturer, and a vessel called the Axioma. But it seems as though he may not have gotten the yacht to penalty-free territory. Reuters recently published footage of the Axioma moored off the British overseas territory of Gibraltar, where it was reportedly detained by authorities. It's one of hundreds of Russian-owned superyachts that had sanctions imposed against them. And it seems as though the Western countries are keeping their promise to hold those targeted by the sanctions responsible for their alleged role in or responsibility for Russia's despicable actions in Ukraine. The Gibraltar government confirmed that it had given the Axioma permission to enter the port, where it was subject to an arrest by a leading international bank of Gibraltar's Supreme Court. A state further explained that the vessel was being detained until further notice, but failed to go into detail about the exact legal claims being levied against it. Soon after news broke about the Axioma being stopped, headlines reported that several other Russian-owned yachts were being detained in Gibraltar and France, including 2 vessels belonging to sanctioned billionaire Alexei Kuzmichev. Number 4. Mikhail Fredman. Russian oligarch Mikhail Fredman is one of the country's most elite figures who are facing economic sanctions imposed by the West due to the country's horrifying invasion of Ukraine. Following the invasion, Fredman and several other extremely wealthy Russians living in London lost access to their own money as the European Union and the UK blocked their bank accounts, credit cards, and ATMs. He told the Spanish news outlet El País that he got a very limited stipend for taxis, food, and other necessities. British authorities determine how much of his own fortune he's allowed to spend, and it's not a lot of money considering the cost of living in London, according to Fredman, who founded the largest private bank in Russia. Speaking with Bloomberg recently, the billionaire said that he had to apply for permission to spend any money in the UK when the sanctions first went into effect. Fredman later told El País that he wasn't sure if the amount he was approved for would be enough to realistically live in London. He complained that he can't even take anyone out to dinner and has been relegated to eating inside the mansion he paid £65 million for in 2016. But Fredman isn't even sure if he'll be able to keep the home or to continue living in the expensive city, and he's upset by the treatment he's received since the Ukraine crisis began. He argued that he's invested billions into Britain and other countries and has lived in London for 8 years. The disgruntled oligarch also described the sanctions as unfair and ineffective, and that powerful Russian elites like himself lacked the power to convince Putin to get his military out of Ukraine. Fredman made it clear that he built his business on his own merit, in other words, without the Russian government's help, and that he has no way to convey messages to Putin or influence the leader in any other way. Number 3. Benny Steinmetz. Benny Steinmetz is an Israeli billionaire who made his fortune in the diamond mining industry. Last year, he was convicted of bribery in both Switzerland and Romania for allegedly paying the ex-wife of Guinea's former leader for exclusive mining rights. He was sentenced to 5 years in a Swiss prison in order to pay a $56 million fine, but has yet to serve his time or pony up. The 65-year-old was arrested a few weeks after the verdicts were handed down when his private jet landed in Greece. His capture came with the help of an Interpol red notice, which alerts authorities worldwide to a wanted person. He was released from custody on the agreement that he would remain in Greece while he worked out his legal issues. Romanian authorities filed an extradition request, but a Greek court denied it based on the claim that Steinmetz's right to a fair trial in Romania has been violated. The beleaguered billionaire continues to maintain his innocence as he appeals his convictions from Greece. Number 2. Roman Abramovich. As Russia and Ukraine recently prepared to enter yet another round of seemingly endless negotiations to resolve the ongoing invasion into Ukraine, concerns were raised about the possibility of Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich being poisoned. Abramovich and other members of the negotiating group had reportedly experienced symptoms during an earlier round of informal talks. The claims were first brought to light by the Wall Street Journal and the investigative journalism outlet Bellingcat. An insider with first-hand knowledge of the incident told The Guardian that Abramovich began to feel ill during conversations that were taking place in Kyiv. His eyes and skin became inflamed, and he ended up losing his sight for several hours. The source also claimed that Abramovich and Ukrainian member of parliament, Rustem Umerov, were among a group of discussion attendees who received medical treatment in Turkey after leaving Ukraine. Thankfully, everyone quickly recovered, and based on the dose of poison that was probably used, it seemed as though the culprit did not plan to kill anyone, according to Bellingcat. It's more likely that the poisoner wanted to sabotage talks to end the war. Meanwhile, a U.S. official told Reuters that there was no evidence that suggested that anyone was poisoned, and that the cause of the mysterious symptoms were most likely environmental. On that note, the details surrounding the incident are murky, so it's impossible to know for sure exactly what, if anything, happened. And number 1, Trevor Milton. 39-year-old Trevor Milton found the zero-emissions truck company Nikola Motors in 2015. He became a billionaire in a surprisingly short time, and in 2020, he began a business relationship with General Motors. But it all came crashing down just days later when the investment research firm Hildenberg Research released a report accusing Milton of making numerous false statements and describing Nikola Motors as an intricate fraud. Milton promised to respond to the allegations via Twitter, but failed to follow through. In the meantime, Nikola's stock fell dramatically. The company denied some of the report's allegations and called its claims misleading. But Bloomberg and the Financial Times were able to confirm some of the details in the report, suggesting that it was at least partially factual. Consequently, Milton resigned from his position at Nikola and became the focus of several federal investigations into the fraud accusations. He was indicted by a grand jury last July on 3 counts of criminal fraud and also faces civil penalties. Milton pled not guilty after surrendering to authorities and was freed on a $100 million bail as the case works its way through the justice system.
Number 10. Road Rage. Police charged 18-year-old Jaden Michael Ardoin with first-degree murder for shooting Wade Edward Smith and added another charge of attempted first-degree murder for injuring James Preston Allen Vaughn. This happened around 7:30 p.m. on February 15th this year, 2022. Authorities were called to the 9000 block of the Louisiana Interstate 105 in Melville, Louisiana, after people reported gunshots being fired. They also noticed the authorities of a blazing vehicle near the gunshots. The incident occurred near a gas station where Smith and Vaughn were regular customers. The duo occasionally tried to hit on Ardoin's girlfriend, who worked at the gas station. The girlfriend asked Smith and Vaughn to back off and stop flirting because she knew that her boyfriend Ardoin was reeling with jealousy. A few minutes later, Ardoin entered the gas station with another person and was visibly upset at seeing Smith and Vaughn. The same evening, while Smith and Vaughn were cruising down the interstate, Ardoin wasted no time in chasing after them with a gun. One bullet caught Smith, who was driving the car, in the back. Vaughn tried to take control of the vehicle from the passenger seat, but lost control and rammed into a nearby tree. The car instantly went up in flames. An unknown man helped Vaughn out, but they already shot and burned Smith to death. They have not identified or charged the person helping Ardoin. Police expect more arrests. While the investigation is underway, they're holding Ardoin behind bars without bond. Number 9. Rekindled Relationship. On August 23, 2013, in Bakersfield, California, police charged Leslie Janaea Chance with murder. An elementary school principal shot her husband of 17 years, Todd Chance, twice. This came as a shock for people who knew her, as she worked for the school district for 16 years. Leslie was first arrested because authorities suspected she was involved in the murder after the shooting, but they soon released her. 3 years later, in 2016, they arrested her again and charged her with first-degree murder. According to the county sheriff's office, the investigation was extensive, as they looked at every angle and reviewed the documents. They even received help from the FBI. According to court documents, Chance had killed her husband for financial gain, but when they went to trial, they found Chance was flirting with his ex-fiancée. The prosecution argued that Chance had killed Todd because he had an affair with his ex-fiancée, and also for financial gain. The jury in January 2020 found Chance guilty of killing her husband, but not for financial gain. The prosecutors revealed Todd and his ex-fiancée Carrie Williams' flirty texts. Todd had asked Carrie for a good pic, and he had received nude photos of her. Chance and Williams had also been poking fun at Leslie. Williams also testified during the trial and spoke about her husband's rekindled relationship. This was all the evidence needed to arrest Leslie Chance, who they sentenced to jail for 50 years. Judge Bremer stated, "No one has won, but justice has been served." Number 8. Improper Imposter. On April 18, 2020, they charged Tanju Akar, a 32-year-old man in Mughal province, Turkey, with murdering his 25-year-old wife, Selvan Akar. The couple were married for many years and had 2 children, but they weren't happy. Tanju was a wife beater. After many years of putting up with his abuse, Selvan finally found the courage to apply for a divorce. The husband disagreed and threw a fit of rage. On December 8, 2020, after months of planning, Tanju stabbed his wife. The knife went straight through her heart and killed Selvan on the spot. Upon confrontation, the perpetrator admitted to the murder and claimed that his wife Selvan had been having an affair. After his arrest, Tanju bragged about the various conspiracies he had concocted to fool the police. The evidence that his wife Selvan was having an affair was all made up by Tanju, which reveals that he intended to kill his wife. He had looked on the net for different ways to kill his wife and cover up the crime. Through a search, he found out that they consider a scammer an essential mitigating factor under Turkish law. Tanju had planned the crime so well that he created fake accounts and sent love messages to his wife, posing as someone else. For his devious plan and execution, Tanju faced the highest penalty charge under the country's legal framework, a life sentence. Number 7. Deadly Doubt. Family members found Belinda Hernandez, a 53-year-old woman, dead in her home in Pearland, Texas. Family members immediately informed the authorities upon finding her lifeless body. The cops issued an arrest warrant for her 56-year-old husband, Houston Police Sergeant Hilario Hernandez. The couple's daughter revealed in court that she, her husband, and her mother were drinking at her parents' place. Her dad, Hilario, suspected Belinda to be fooling around with a male friend, which had set him off beyond measure. Later that night, when the couple's daughter texted her mom to inform her that she had reached home safely, she did not receive any reply. Her mother was not someone who would ignore any calls or messages. The worried daughter persistently attempted to call her mom when finally her dad received the call. He yelled out that his wife was fine and quickly hung up. This did not convince the daughter, so she and her husband returned to her parents' home, where they found Belinda lying face down in the kitchen with multiple gunshot wounds. Hours later, they busted Hilario Hernandez about 100 miles north of the Mexican border at a Kingsville hotel. A Houston police spokeswoman confirmed Hernandez was a member of the force. The police are looking for surveillance footage to establish more details of the case, Pearland police spokesman Jason Wells told the Chronicle. Number 6. Driven by Jealousy. In Flatbush, Brooklyn, Kadeem Wilkinson stabbed 26-year-old Dwight Braithwaite after a fight inside a fried chicken restaurant in the winter of 2013. According to prosecutors, Kadeem stabbed Braithwaite, a random customer at the restaurant, because he was flirting with his girlfriend while dining at the restaurant. Wilkinson could spend up to 25 years behind bars for the alleged crime, triggered by uncontrolled passion. The defendant, his girlfriend, and a stranger, Dwight Braithwaite, were dining at a Chicken Express at 1341 Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, when things suddenly took a wrong turn. After leaving the restaurant, Wilkinson confronted Braithwaite for getting a bit too frisky with his girlfriend a few moments earlier. The argument soon escalated into a brawl just outside the restaurant. Wilkinson broke off from the argument, ran home to grab a knife, returned, and stabbed the victim in his back at around 12:45 a.m. Surveillance video captured when Wilkinson darted in and out of his house on that fateful night. Street cameras recorded the moment he stabbed Braithwaite, who was walking home too. The girlfriend in question testified against Wilkinson and confirmed that he had admitted to stabbing Braithwaite out of jealousy. Number 5. Killer Duo. A 42-year-old Mesa man stabbed another man to death for allegedly flirting with his girlfriend. Court documents say Jesse Dakins attacked 34-year-old Joseph Treviso after Treviso got a bit too comfortable with Dakins' girlfriend, 34-year-old Tiffany Warren. Dakins fatally stabbed Treviso in the living room of Warren's Mesa apartment. Court records reveal Treviso had mental disabilities and Dakins was his caretaker. After the dreadful deed, Dackins wrapped Treviso in a butterfly print shower curtain and dragged his body out to Warren's car. Dackins and Warren tidied up the place and swept the floors clean before driving off to Star Valley near Payson, where they got rid of the body. The story, however, doesn't end there. The couple's car broke down on the way back, and so they stole a van from Dackins' ex-employer. They then fled for Wisconsin, where Dackins once lived. Somewhere near the state border, the Winslow police pulled them over and arrested them on suspicion of vehicle theft. Out of fear, Warren confessed to all the events that led to the vehicle theft. Dackins later led the police deep into the forest, where they had hidden Treviso's body. Police said the killer duo admitted to being under the influence of meth when executing the brutal murder. They charged Warren and Dackins with first-degree murder, abuse of a vulnerable adult, theft of means of transportation, and tampering with evidence. Number 4. The Revenge. A simple flirtation on a bus led to cold-blooded murder in Brooklyn. Michael Gary, a Supreme Court judge, brought down a life sentence on Lawrence Jones for the killing of an 18-year-old Isaiah Roberts. They tricked the teen into going to a location in Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy section out of revenge for flirting with Jones's wife. The woman's husband, Jones, and Roberts, an immigrant eager to become an architect, got into an argument. When Jones pulled a gun on Roberts, he desperately tried to run away. Out of the 5 rounds shot at Roberts, 1 caught him in his back. A 2012 report claims he hid the murder weapon in the woman's purse. They found Roberts unconscious in Howard, and they later confirmed his death at Kings County Hospital. Jones, however, maintained his stance of being innocent throughout the trial, but that did not deter the judge from sentencing him to 20 years in prison. Number 3. Double Trouble. According to prosecutors, on the night of June 6, 2016, David White's girlfriend was driving him and her cousin Fatima Mohammed home in her minivan. Mohammed jokingly teased White's girlfriend that he had been flirting with her. This absurd assertion threw White off guard, and he shot Mohammed in the head in a fit of rage. That was not all. He even threatened to kill his girlfriend if she tried to run away. The terrified girlfriend drove to White's sister's house, where White collected material to dispose of Mohammed's body. He threw a plastic bag over Mohammed's head, and then shoved his body into a laundry bag. He then tried to conceal the crime by hiding the body in a closet, and later cutting out the blood-stained floor mat of the minivan. He then drove to 60th Street and Aberdeen Avenue and hid Mohammed's body behind a vacant house. White's girlfriend wanted to stay as far away as possible from the demented man. A few days later, she confided in her sister and the Duluth police regarding the gruesome killing. It was then that they found Mohammed's body in the exact location disclosed by the girlfriend. At around the same time, someone dropped off a substantial piece of evidence at the police headquarters. The unnamed person turned over a .22 caliber handgun and a handwritten note. The note was an open letter written by White, confessing to his crime. The handwriting analysis and the blood samples taken from the minivan were all the proof needed to charge White with Mohammed's murder. A few months later, as the trial was in progress, West Fargo police were called to the home where White was then living with his girlfriend. It wasn't for any routine or because White missed his hearing. This time, he had shot his girlfriend in the face. According to prosecutors and North Dakota court records, they sentenced White to 20 years in prison for the double murder of his girlfriend and her cousin. Number 2. Pierced through the heart. In September 2019, 26-year-old Siobhan Collins Grant brutally attacked Shakira Losik in Chalk Farm, North London. The fatal stabbing comes after a series of rows the two women had since the day they met at the nightclub a few weeks back. She stabbed Losik with a knife right through her heart. The 22-year-old died as doctors performed an open-heart surgery right in the middle of the street. The cause of death was determined to be because of cardiorespiratory failure resulting from blood loss. A whiff of jealousy sparked the entire ordeal. The Crown Prosecution Service revealed Losik was not happy with Grant's advances towards her girlfriend, Savannah. Days after the altercation at the nightclub, Grant was making pit stops at different friends' homes after her eviction from the hostel she stayed in. On September 8th, they asked her to leave the current house for talking behind the owner's back and sleeping with another friend's boyfriend. When she returned to Belmont Street to pick up her belongings with 4 of her friends, she found Losik waiting with a bunch of her friends, and some of them had knives. Alarmed and without a moment's notice, Grant lunged towards Losik with a knife of her own, screamed out her name, and drove it into the unsuspecting woman's chest. Grant fled the scene, but they heard her say, "What have I done?" before she tried to dispose of the murder weapon in a nearby canal. Grant pleaded guilty on the 4th day of her trial, and they sentenced her with a jail term of 8 years. Number 1. The Last Betrayal. A 23-year-old was distressed so much that she took the extreme steps months after breaking up with her boyfriend. A chance meeting at the University of Huddersfield had almost instantly sparked a romance between the two. A few months in, Emily Elliott of Huddersfield, in February 2020, discovered that her boyfriend, Shay Doyle, was cheating on her. Elliott realized she was being played, and that Doyle had two-timed her with another woman on Facebook. The pair had even blocked each other on all social media platforms. That's when the broken woman couldn't stand the betrayal and tried taking her life. She recovered and gave the relationship another chance. By now, the boyfriend had moved to Wilmslow. Doyle believed things were now sorted. He said, "Things are going well. We talked about having children together." Although everything looked fine from the outside, we could not deny that the couple had a turbulent relationship. Several months after the initial confrontation, Doyle found Emily dead at her residence. Here's how things played out. On June 27, 2020, Doyle was worried when Emily did not respond to his calls or messages. He tried reaching out to her best friend, Kimberly Knight, who said she had received some weird messages from Emily. Doyle immediately sensed something fishy and boarded the train to Huddersfield. Once there, he took a cab to Emily's home. A visibly emotional Doyle said at the court hearing, "I went upstairs, and Emily's bedroom door was closed. He opened the door to find Emily unconscious. He immediately dialed the emergency services and attempted to perform CPR until the paramedics arrived. But Emily was long gone." At the hearing, based on Emily's long story of mental health issues, previous attempts at overdosing, and heavy drinking, they concluded that she had committed suicide, and there was no foul play involved. Would you rather let your spouse date your best friend or your arch enemy? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed our video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.